What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back with my first movie review of 2025, and nothing would give me greater pleasure than to report that Wolfman from director Leigh Whannell, starring Christopher Abbott and Julia Garner, is some brand spanking new, horror franchise resurrection masterpiece that's going to blow everybody's minds. But the reality is, I thought Wolfman was boring and lifeless and utterly devoid of all the qualities that I look for in a horror movie. Like, the special effects were dreadful, the performances were uninspired, the screenplay was horribly underwritten, the characters are just totally devoid of any kind of personality. It blows my mind that Blumhouse is as successful as they are, because I was looking at a list of their top 100 movies ever on, at least as they are ranked on Rotten Tomatoes earlier today. And as I was going through the list, I was like, I hate that. Oh, I haven't seen that. I mean, there are plenty of Blumhouse movies that I've not seen, but of the movies that I've seen, it's movies like Halloween Kills and The Exorcist Believer or the remake of Speak No Evil. And there are obviously exceptions like Get Out or Insidious from director James Wan. But I think I finally come to terms with the fact that I fucking hate Blumhouse Productions. I hate their style. I hate their brand. I hate their entire approach to horror. And we're actually going through a great period for the genre right now, where companies like Neon or A24 or independent filmmakers like Damien Leone are giving us fantastic horror movies like Terrifier 3 and things like that. Like, it's a great time to be a fan. Or Damien McCarthy, who made Oddity. I mean, last year, 2024, was a fantastic year. And we have some horror movies on the calendar that I'm very excited for. I'm seeing Presence in an early access screening this evening. Hopefully I'll get this review up before then. And we have Companion right around the corner. I have a feeling that this horror renaissance is going to just continue chugging right along. But Blumhouse, man, who are the diehard Blumhouse fans that help these movies be so wildly successful? Because for every flop that they make, they also have some movies that do extremely well. Like Leigh Whannell, who directed Wolfman, his last movie was The Invisible Man, the remake from 2020. And just to give you an idea of how successful it was, they made that movie for $7 million, and it had box office of $144.5 million. That is serious money. It's basically almost entirely profit. And so it makes sense that Blumhouse would be like, all right, Leigh Whannell, let's remake yet another classic franchise from Universal from the late 30s or early 40s. And obviously back then you had The Invisible Man and Frankenstein and Dracula and The Wolfman and, The Mummy, and later on The Creature of the Black Lagoon. Like, Universal made a lot of really cool horror movies in the 30s, 40s, and early 50s that obviously people have very, very fond memories of.
Jugular. That's the way Jenny Williams was killed?
Yes. Find something?
Animal tracks.
I wouldn't say I'm the world's biggest fanatic for the Wolfman from 1941, although I love and adore the whole Lon Chaney family, senior and junior. I thought they were absolute masters of their craft. But for me, when I think of werewolf movies, I think back to my childhood, where the first two werewolf movies that I ever saw are strong contenders for the best werewolf movies ever made, because I saw The Howling and An American Werewolf in London on TV as a little kid, and they just blew my whole world wide open.
Yes, sir?
A naked American man stole my balloon.
What?
Actually, the very first movie star that I ever met was the star of American Werewolf in London. Hang on, I'm blanking on his name. It's David something. Hang on. David Naughton. When I was 10, I was at this golf tournament where celebrities and businessmen would play golf against each other. And I was sitting at this lunch I was a little kid, and I kept looking at this guy. I was like, I recognize you. Why do I recognize you? He was like, did you ever see American Werewolf in London? I was like, oh my God. Anyway, so I was thrilled. As far as I was concerned, he was fucking Elvis. But with The Howling, you have Joe Dante firing on all cylinders, and with An American Werewolf in London, you've got director John Landis firing on all cylinders, and they were using the special effects wizardry of two of the greatest artists in the history of special effects, Rob Bottin and Rick Baker, and those special effects still hold up pretty goddamn well, and they were hilarious, and they were gory, and they were sexy. I think the first time I ever saw full frontal nudity in any movie ever might have been The Howling, but I was like, 5 or 6. It's hard to know what was my first encounter with the female form on the big or small screen. In any case, like, when you think about those movies and just how exciting they were, and like what long shelf lives they've had, and just how they've inspired so many subsequent filmmakers, you watch a movie like The Wolfman, or the brand new one, and it just blows my mind how they seem to have overlooked or like been willfully ignorant of all the ingredients that go into making a good werewolf movie. Or what was that werewolf movie made by Neil Marshall, the guy who did The Descent? think it was called Dog Soldiers. Hang on one sec. Not the greatest werewolf movie, but if you just want to see British soldiers while running drills fighting werewolves, yeah, Dog Soldiers, 2002. It kicks ass. It's a really, really fun movie to watch. I've never seen Brotherhood of the Wolf. I don't even know if that is a werewolf movie, but I've heard that Brotherhood of the Wolf is good. If that is a werewolf movie, it's one that I need to see. But without giving away any spoilers from this new movie, Wolfman, I'll just say that the characters are completely, totally uninspired, underwritten. We're like, why am I spending 2 hours in their company? Why am I supposed to take an interest in these people? And Julia Garner, she's a feisty, scrappy actress. Everybody loves and adores her from that show, Ozark. I saw season 1, 2, and 3. I never saw the final season, but she's got so much personality, and she's like, she oftentimes would steal the show entirely. She's fantastic. I know she's got the chops to deliver, a world-class performance, but her character, it could have been played by a cardboard cutout of somebody resembling a woman, and it would have been just as, just as interesting a character. Like they gave her nothing to work with in terms of her dialogue or her emotions or her character. And Christopher Abbott, he already kind of looks a little unusual and pouty to begin with, but as he starts to transform in this movie, I just found it to be unintentionally humorous. The special effects makeup are just dreadful. And I guess I'll give him a high five for trying to do practical effects on an actor. But when you have quite literally like 100 years worth of horror movies to look back upon for inspiration, like look at like the fucking Thriller music video with Michael Jackson at the beginning turning into a werewolf while he's watching himself in the movie theater. Once again, that's John Landis, and I believe Rick Baker did those special effects. They're incredible, and that was 40 years ago. How has so much artistry and so much craft been kind of forgotten or lost leading up to the 2020s? I just feel like Blumhouse, they do not care. They just crank out horror movies like sausage, and they know that if they make enough of them, and they've made a lot of horror movies, eventually one of them will perform well. So maybe it's time for me to start recruiting people to my Blumhouse Destruction Society or my Legion of Doom opposed to the existence of Blumhouse. Like, once again, obviously I'm being half serious, but I hope there are people out there like myself who see through the Blumhouse kind of phenomenon or the Blumhouse brand. Like the Emperor truly has no clothes. When was the last time they made a horror movie where you're like, that is my favorite fucking horror movie that I've ever seen? Because when I was looking at their list, there wasn't one. And admittedly, my taste in horror tends to be a little sleazier or a little trashier. Like, I love to see tons of gore and tons of nudity. Like, there need to be ingredients or scenes where you get in trouble for talking about them at work or in trouble for talking about them at school, where like your parents are going to punish you if they catch you watching them as a little kid. Like, that is what I want to see from a horror movie. Movies like fucking Hellraiser. I want, the real, genuine, uncompromised, undiluted, just horror experience. And Blumhouse, everything just seems to be so cautious and so safe. Like, oh, you can let your kids watch these and nothing's going to be too upsetting or traumatizing or disturbing. It's like, fun, friendly horror for the whole family, which for me is the exact opposite of what I want from a horror experience. And I think one of the main problems that Blumhouse has with a lot of the horror movies is that they don't quite know how to do like the mystic alchemy of creating suspense or dread or fear. They tend to be very action-driven. Like even Invisible Man, I'm not going to go into my reasons why I fucking despise the Invisible Man remake. Actually, I'll go into it a little bit. Claude Rains in the original Invisible Man had like the world's greatest voice. So what did they do with their remake of Invisible Man? They don't let the Invisible Man talk at all. I'm like, well, you're kind of missing the whole point of what made the original Invisible Man so great. And also, he just looked fantastic with the bandages and the shades. James Whale in the 1930s was one of the greatest artists in the history of the horror genre. Between The Old Dark House and Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and The Invisible Man, James Whale made some of the best horror movies ever made. So I thought the recent Invisible Man was absolutely dreadful and missed the mark across the board. But what it at least had was like those moments where Elizabeth, what the hell is it? Elizabeth Moss? Is that her name? Yes, Elizabeth Moss, when like she throws the paint on him at the top of the stairs, at least it was like a moment that was like shocking, or it kind of gave you a jolt. It's like, all right, you're at least delivering some of the sizzle, some of the goods that people expect from modern horror. This new movie has none of that. Like, there's never any of the magic trick where like you're kind of like snapping here, making the audience look here, there's something's about to jump out here, or somebody closes a car door and the monster's standing right behind. Even if you just want cheap jump scares like from modern horror movies, they're totally absent from this new movie. And what you basically get is a lot of the shit you got in the second half of the remake of See No Evil, where it's action-driven, and action is not scary. Action can be thrilling, and it can get your blood pumping, and it can be exciting and visceral, but it's not scary watching people run from one house to the next, stabbing each other with knives and shooting each other with rifles. That is an action movie. And this new Wolfman movie rapidly just turns into a really crummy action movie, a terrible action movie where you're watching this Wolfman who looks totally absurd. And I guess I got to offer one spoiler because there are these idiotic interactions between him and his daughter. And early on in the movie, they have this little game between father and daughter. Once again, mild spoiler warning, but if you don't want any spoilers, bail out. But he always says, like, tell me what I'm thinking. And she'll put her hand on her head and like, you're thinking that you love me or blah, blah, blah. Like, it's just, father-daughter bonding, yada, yada, yada. But by the end of the movie, they start taking it seriously as if she actually does have telepathic powers. She's like, Daddy's ready to let go, or Daddy's in pain and wants us to kill him. I'm like, this is idiotic. What you're turning something that was kind of sweet and affectionate early on into mystical supernatural powers, like she's Jean Grey from the X-Men. If you want to go down that route where people actually have telepathic powers in this world, fine, but build it up. Anytime you're dealing with the supernatural and you're making a movie that takes place outside the bounds of reality, you have to be careful and deliberate and move with a sense of purpose when it comes to establishing the rules of that world. And usually there's a scene where someone's like, well, these are the rules for the vampire. These are the rules for the werewolf. So you kind of know what are the rules of this fictional setting so you can watch the story unfold and you can have that willful suspension of disbelief. Like, this is just absurd. And it's almost like they didn't even know what they wanted the movie to be, or like maybe it feels almost like a censor came through and said anything that might potentially stimulate or excite or terrify or thrill the audience, it's all got to go. It just needs to be as bland as like a glass of warm milk before bed from start to finish. But because I'm so out of touch with like the Blumhouse like fans or the Blumhouse audience, the people that have made Blumhouse, this massive brand, a massively successful company, I really have no idea how well this movie is going to perform. If this movie makes like $30 million on its opening weekend, I wouldn't be surprised because there have been so many Blumhouse movies that have been insanely successful that I intensely disliked. Or I would like to believe that the other people that are like, there's nothing in this movie for us to sink our teeth into. There's no entertainment value of any kind, and that it'll just be like the world's biggest bomb. What is the budget of this movie? Does it say? Wow. $25 million. Universal threw down some cash for this. And I get it. After the incredible performance of Invisible Man, that movie, which once again made for $7 million, grossed, 135 or 145 or 145. I get it. The Universal's like, all right, give Leigh Whannell a little bit more money. Let's see what he can do. But I feel like whatever capital or goodwill has been built up by Leigh Whannell with this past success, he's about to squander it on this one. I'm sure he will work again. He's been making good horror movies since the early 2000s when he and James Wan co-wrote Saw, which James Wan directed. That was where Leigh Whannell got his start. But man, I won't say it's a sophomore slump because it's not Leigh Whannell's second movie. But I imagine Universal had very high expectations for this movie. Start the year off with a bang, and I just have a feeling that it's going to vanish. Although right now there's so little competition, maybe it'll generate some buzz or some box office. But when you have a movie like Nosferatu still in theaters, yet another remake of a classic, but a movie that really feels like its own film with its own its own style and its own reason for being. I mean, Nosferatu is just fucking earth-shattering compared to The Wolfman. But if I had to say one nice thing about this movie, I'll say that the state of Oregon looks incredible. I mean, the photography of the natural environment looks just awe-inspiring. So if you want to just appreciate how beautiful that state is, this movie delivers. And it's better than a lot of other crummy werewolf movies that I've seen. Like Mike Nichols made a movie just called Wolf with Jack Nicholson and Michelle Pfeiffer in the 1990s, which I saw in the theater. And that's dreadful. Like Mike Nichols, he's great at making movies like Carnal Knowledge and The Graduate and things like that. Or even like Charlie Wilson's War. Horrible at making werewolf movies. Let me just do a quick Google check. Best werewolf movies ever. The Wolfman with Benicio del Toro, which I did not see. The Company of Wolves, which completely confused me and my friends when we were little. We rented that for like a birthday party sleepover, and we watched that on VHS. And We were all totally bewildered and confused, but I need to revisit that at some point. That's a Neil Jordan movie, I believe. There's Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. It's actually kind of a thin genre. Oh, yeah, Trick or Treat. Trick or Treat actually is an anthology horror movie, but one of the segments deals with werewolves, and it's really good. Or if you're interested in some comedy, you can watch Teen Wolf, which I saw 100 billion times when I was growing up. But yeah, it's funny. There are not a lot of great werewolf movies. So like I said earlier on in this video, I was blessed with the fact that when I first started watching movies as a little kid, two of the best werewolf movies, arguably the two best werewolf movies ever made, came out back to back, and I loved them to pieces. I'm basically happy to watch double features of The Howling and An American Werewolf in London for the rest of my life, anytime I want to scratch my itch for werewolves in action. So there it is. I don't think I have much more to say about Wolfman, apart from the fact that it's not a terrible movie. It's just incredibly dull, incredibly uneventful, incredibly unexciting to watch. Everything about a movie that you want to be entertaining or thrilling or exciting is just like inert, and it's just not there. The script is uninspired, the performances are non-existent, the special effects are terrible, the action's terrible. It's not scary at all. Maybe one of the only few technical innovations that it uses, it's got an interesting way of portraying what it looks like when a werewolf's looking at something in terms of seeing things kind of in infrared. That was kind of cool, but they did something similar with Wolfman back in the early 80s, which I have not seen in 40 years. I don't know how well Wolfman holds up, but I'm sure as hell confident that it will hold up better than Wolfman from 2025. So sorry I don't have something positive to report, but I guess as a way of just ending things on a positive note, I remain in awe of the success of Blumhouse. I feel like at a time when the movie business is struggling, at a time when the movie business is kind of contracting, at least Blumhouse knows how to make hit movies. We need more companies like Blumhouse that know how to make hit movies on a small budget. I just don't respond to the final product. On an artistic basis, they've made no horror movie where I'm like, feel like I want to invite my siblings over or friends over and like, let's watch a fucking horror movie. I like horror movies to be a little bit more rancid and indefensible, or they just need to be made with such astonishing craftsmanship that they just become an undeniable Hall of Fame classic or masterpiece. Wolfman is none of those things, so check it out if you like. If you love Blumhouse, you'll probably enjoy it. But if, like me, if you want to join my new secret society of Blumhouse-hating horror fans, well, then everybody's invited. And if you can come up with a cool name, well, then I will give you credit in my next video on the horror genre. But that's all I've got to say about this video. It's time to wrap this sucker up. I'm off to see Presence here in an hour and a half, and hopefully that'll be a better horror movie. But if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.